Hello and welcome to my very first ever YouTube video on my new YouTube channel, Vital Energy Coaching. If you like what you see today, make sure to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for notifications. Today we're going to be covering the topic, is gluten harmful? Why wheat is not fit for human consumption. Ooh, I know, big topic there. So, in recent years, we have seen in our society an explosion of gluten-related diseases, namely celiac disease and gluten sensitivity. But could wheat be damaging and harmful to every last one of us? Let's take a look. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about a protein called zonulin. Zonulin is a protein that is in charge of regulating the tight junctions in our gut lining. The epithelial cell lining in our GI tract is only one single cell thick, and this very delicate membrane is responsible for keeping unwanted things out of our bloodstream. So it relies on having tight junctions and healthy cells in order to do so. When we consume gluten, not just celiacs or gluten-sensitive people, but all people who consume gluten trigger the activation of this protein, zonulin. And this causes the cell junctions to open up and enables unwanted things to slip into the bloodstream. And chronically loose junctions between these cells can be referred to as a leaky gut. And some examples of things that may leak into the bloodstream when you have a leaky gut are chemicals from food, pesticides, undigested food particles, antigens and allergens, even toxins that are released from bad bacteria in your gut. And the thing is, when something enters the bloodstream, it now has the ability to go anywhere in your entire body. The bloodstream is like the body's highway. And when unwanted things like toxins or chemicals or antigens get into the bloodstream, they can quickly move anywhere in the body, causing systemic inflammation. And this is why people can be experiencing gluten-related issues that are seemingly unconnected to the gut. It can trigger anything from ADHD, anxiety, depression, to inflammation-related issues such as joint pain, back pain, all kinds of things. The list just goes on and on. And just to touch on how this can affect the immune system. When things are getting into the bloodstream that shouldn't be there, this causes the immune system to work extra hard, and it can also confuse the immune system, causing it to develop antibodies to things that should have never been in the bloodstream in the first place. And over time, this can lead to autoimmune disorders, food sensitivities, and even food allergies that can then be inherited by our children. So the blood-brain barrier actually works very similarly to the gut, the epithelial lining in the GI tract. The blood-brain barrier is also responsible for protecting the brain from unwanted intruders. And the blood-brain barrier is a lot more complicated and a lot more dense than our delicate epithelial lining. But like the epithelial lining, it also has receptors for zonulin. So it is possible that experience a leaky gut can also lead to experiencing what is called a leaky brain. And a lot more scientific research needs to be done on this topic, but we do know that there are zonulin receptors there, and any damage to the blood-brain barrier can lead to activating and triggering neurodegenerative and neuroinflammatory diseases such as schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, bipolar disorder, anxiety, depression, etc. So it is crucial that we have a healthy blood-brain barrier. as well as a healthy epithelial lining in our gut. So how did we get here? What is the history of wheat? Ancient wheat was actually called einkorn wheat. And this wheat variety was vastly different from the wheat that we have in our modern society. It acted differently when you prepared food with it. It didn't rise as much. It was a much flatter rise. It wasn't as stretchy. Wheat over time has been genetically modified to improve its stretchiness, its doughiness, its fluffiness, to create the muffins and the croissants and the sourdough breads that we now consume today. So when did we start consuming wheat? Well, the seeds of grasses were not consumed by humans until around 10,000 years ago. And this may sound like a really long time, but it actually pales in comparison to our entire evolutionary history. And this new consumption of the seeds of grasses, including maize, wheat, millet, etc., was due to global food shortages. And around this time, dental issues, diabetes, and gut-related issues start to emerge in anthropologic studies. In 1943, the International Center for Improvement of Maize and Wheat, funded by the Rockefellers, I'll just leave that one there, got together to improve the agricultural sustainability of Mexico. And to do this, they created our modern form of wheat, which is called Triticum aestivum. And this modern form of wheat looks very different from our ancient einkorn wheat. Wheat used to be very tall, as we used to refer to them, amber waves of grain. And the modern wheat is a much shorter, fatter, dwarf-like version. And it did improve the agricultural sustainability of Mexican farmers, but it came at a cost. And one of the costs is that our modern wheat has far more of the proteins that activate celiac disease. So something interesting from a scientific standpoint about the genetics of wheat and the seeds of other grasses is that when you combine two species to create a new variety, there is the potential for that new variety to double its chromosomes. Usually, half the chromosomes come from one parent, half the chromosomes come from the other parent. But with the seeds of grasses, they have the ability to take all chromosomes from one parent, all chromosomes from the other, doubling the total number of chromosomes. So for humans, instead of taking 23 chromosomes from mom and 23 chromosomes from dad, we would be taking 46 chromosomes from each, totaling in 92 chromosomes that make you you. In one analysis of a wheat strain, 95% of the proteins found in that strain were also found in the parents. However, 5% of those proteins were not found in either parent. So we are making huge genetic leaps in this wheat that we are consuming. In fact, wheat is more different from its former self than a human is genetically to an ape. And yet we still call it wheat. And this is the wheat that is now in our grocery stores, in our cereals, in our bagels, in our breads. It is what we consume in our pastas, in our cakes, on a daily basis. And when this new Triticum aestivum wheat was created, it was spread around the world without any animal or human testing. In fact, impacts on human health were not even a consideration at the time. And gluten is not the only toxin in wheat. In fact, there are dozens of toxins in wheat, and one such toxin is called wheat germ agglutinin, WGA. And this particular toxin has a detrimental effect on our digestive system because it blocks an important hormone that regulates the gallbladder's release of bile and the pancreatic release of enzymes. And just a little crash course on what that means for your digestion. Your body relies on bile from the gallbladder to flush toxins out of the liver. It also relies on that gallbladder bile to break down and digest your fats. And your body relies on pancreatic enzymes to break down virtually all of your foods, your proteins, your carbohydrates, your sugars. So when these two things are impacted, you are immediately going to see a malabsorption of nutrients and nutrient deficiencies beginning to climb. And this can also lead to gut dysbiosis and a whole array of GI-related issues. Now, let's just touch quickly on the impact of wheat on your blood sugar. So wheat actually increases your blood sugar more than table sugar. It increases your blood sugar more than a Snickers bar, which sounds crazy. And so it is one of the leading causes of diabetes in this world. And yet the CDC recommends that diabetics eat a diet rich in healthy whole grains, and meanwhile just putting the diabetics on diabetes medication. And let's talk a little bit about the effect of gluten on your brain. Now, we already talked about the inflammatory effect. We talked about the blood-brain barrier and the risk for neuroinflammatory and neurodegenerative diseases. But I want to talk about why wheat is so addicting. So gluten actually binds to morphine-like receptors in the brain called gluteomorphines. And some people who stop eating wheat find that they are experiencing an actual withdrawal. And this withdrawal can trigger physiological and psychological symptoms, and it can be very, very difficult for some people to come off of wheat. So because of this, if you are planning to go off of wheat and you do suffer from any kind of neurological issues, definitely plan your withdrawal strategically. Make sure that you have support. And know that whatever you're experiencing during this transition is only temporary. And that in order to achieve vibrant health, it is necessary to go through this process. So in conclusion, wheat and gluten especially definitely put us at risk for the development of systemic inflammation, for a whole myriad of health issues, including neurological, neurodegenerative, and neuroinflammatory issues. And the kicker is you don't have to be experiencing any GI symptoms to be experiencing the detrimental effects of wheat. You may be experiencing issues in your thyroid or joint pain. You may be experiencing anxiety. The list goes on and on. So it can be difficult to make the connection that wheat is actually contributing to these problems. Wheat, in fact, can actually be considered an anti-nutrient because of how harmful it is to the body. So it's also important to touch on the concept that removing gluten and removing wheat from the diet by itself is not a cure. It can have incredible impacts for the health of many people on its own. But for most people, removing one thing is not going to lead to a cure. Health needs to be built from all angles. And it is always important to improve the diet by consuming as many vegetables as possible and always eating organic food. So there's a lot to learn about gluten, and there's a lot to learn about wheat and how it interacts with our body. And I just want to encourage you all to stay curious about health because there's so much to learn about it. And it's not always right in front of you. In fact, we are not taught nearly as much as we should be about our own bodies and how they interact with what we come into contact with in the outside world. If you learned something and you want to learn more, make sure to subscribe to my channel and ring that bell. And I have linked below 2 NIH studies that I find very interesting about this topic. And I've also linked 2 of my favorite gluten, gut, brain related books Wheat Belly by William Davis, MD, and You Can Fix Your Brain by Dr. Tom O'Brien. Thank you and have a beautiful day.